I'm Amanda. I'm formally trained as a materials engineer, but I currently teach kindergarten through eighth grade students all about engineering. I teach my middle school students, so students between the ages of 11 and almost 14, how to use Fusion. And I'm here to encourage you to start early if you can. If you're young, this is a great time to start this amazing program so you can learn to design anything. In every video, I teach to usable design, so things that function in everyday life. Um, and every video, I show a new technique or a new kind of math function that's involved with Fusion. This video is going to be all about circles and specifically looking at radius and diameter. In each one of my videos, I'm going to stress that if you're a beginner, the hardest part of learning Fusion is actually the order in which to click and which to select things. If you can get through this initial frustration and work through whether a right click or left click or the order in which you select things, you will be just fine in Fusion. A lot of students quit because of this frustration, and so it's kind of like learning, it's like if you're learning to write for the first time. You know, you first start with letters, and then you go on to words, and then maybe sentence structure. Same thing with Fusion, and so you have to let Fusion know what you're going to do. So we're going to talk about a little bit about kind of the flow in which Fusion works. This lesson assumes that you already understand some of the basic layout of Fusion. I'm going to cover some of the basics in another video, but this one's going to get right into being able to use the program. So the first thing you always want to do is you can save this as something. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a pen holder. And so I'm just going to call it pen holder. And I'm going to use both circles that use a radius and a diameter just to demonstrate demonstrate the basic fundamentals of this lesson. The first thing I want to start out with is I want to define what a radius and diameter is. If you're young, you might not have seen this before. If you haven't taken math in a few years, you also might haven't seen this before. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sketch. So I'm going to you can either left click on create and then left click on create sketch here, or you can click on this symbol here, and that's our sketch symbol. I'm going to go ahead and left click on that. So I've told Fusion I want to sketch, and now I need to tell it where I want to sketch. So I'm essentially kind of, if I'm talking to the program, I'm like, I want to sketch, and I want to sketch here. So I'm going to sketch on this top plane here. I can tell it's the top plane by looking at my view cube over here, and notice how it shows this top in this upper right hand corner. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my units. I am American, and so I work in I've actually been trained in both metric and US customary, but I think most people are used to inches. And so there's going to be some other tutorials where I will use the metric system. In this system, in this tutorial, I will use US customary. So I'm going to go with inch. I'm going to say OK. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is define what each one of the components that I'm talking about is. So if I go to the top and I left click on create, it will give me the option, if I scroll down a little bit, to circle. And so the most common the circle that I tend to use is this center diameter circle, meaning it starts to sketch from the center of the circle. So I'm going to go ahead and left click, and notice how my cursor has this nice circle next to it, and indicating that that circle icon is active. I'm going to just draw a random circle located at my origin. So I'm going to left click and let go. And then I'm going to drag out my mouse a little bit to make my circle larger. I'm going to left click again, and that turns my circle blue, meaning it's not fully defined. We're going to talk about defining things as we draw. So I have a circle here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a half circle. The most common way to draw a half circle is using the arc command. I'm going to use my 3-point arc here. Now an arc is only part of a circle. It is not a full circle, and I'm going to show you kind of the difference here in a second. So I'm just going to arbitrarily go out to the left hand. Actually, I'm going to go on the right hand side here. I'm going to left click on the right side, let go. I'm going to go to this line, left click, again, let go. And then if I just drag my mouse up slightly, this arc appears. And then I'm going to left click. So I have my arc and I have my circle. Notice my circle, we're going to make three-dimensional objects in a minute. And we need, in order to make objects three-dimensional, you have to have what's called a profile. So a profile means that there's no open space. So notice how there's an open space here. So we would not be able to make this three-dimensional. The circle is fine because it's fully enclosed. So a profile is defined as an object that is fully enclosed and it doesn't intersect itself. So an example of something that intersects itself is the figure 8. And so in the middle of the 8, those two lines cross. And so that theoretically would not be considered a profile. So to close this off, I'm just going to add a line. So I'm going to left click, let go, and then left click, let go at each of those corners. I'm going to press my escape key and that gets me out of that function. The next thing I want to show you is something that is a slight difference between circles and arcs, and it'll help you kind of identify what you're working with as you're drawing. So I'm going to press my D key on my keyboard, and that gets me into my dimension command. It's just a shortcut. Notice my dimension symbol at the top left is highlighted, indicating that it's on. You can also see that dimension symbol next to the cursor, and so you know that it is indeed active. So I'm going to go to the outside of my circle. I'm going to left click and let go, and then I'm going to physically move my mouse a little out, and I'm going to left click. I'm just going to press enter at this point. I don't care how big my circle is. So notice this little symbol here is a circle with this line that goes all the way across, indicating the diameter. So what this dimension is showing is that this diameter is 6.373 inches. I'm going to do the same for my arc. I'm going to left click and let go on the outside of my arc. I'm going to physically drag up my mouse and I'm going to left click. And again, I don't really care what this is. So here, let's look at the differences of what this is. I'm going to go ahead and drag this dimension downward so you can kind of see the differences between the two. So if I look at my circle, it's anytime there's a circle, Fusion by default will automatically represent the circle by its diameter. So let's look carefully at these arrows here. So if I look at this arrow here and I follow it along with my cursor, it goes all the way to the other side. And so this is telling you by definition that the diameter goes from one side of the circle, goes through the center of the circle, and extends to the opposite side of that circle. On the other hand, we have my radius here. So an arc is just part of a circle, and I always in my mind visualize an arc as like part of a circle, and the other part of the circle is hidden. So it's, in my mind, that's how I kind of define it as. In reality, it is not hidden, it's just not there. So if I were to draw this circle, it would actually extend all the way out here. So the way that arcs are defined is it's defined by the radius. So notice that there's an R. So here we have, for my diameter, we have a circle with a line all the way through. For my radius, though, it extends from the center of the circle to the side. Notice how it doesn't go all the way to this imaginary circle. So it's only half of the length. And it's really important to understand this because as you are dimensioning this, you might get frustrated with the differences between radius and diameter. So now let's play around with the dimensions. I'm going to create an arc, and the diameter of the circle to be equal to each other. And so I'm going to I'm going to double left click on my dimension, and it gives me the option to edit these dimensions. So I'm just going to make this the diameter of this circle 4. So I'm just going to press 4 and enter. And notice how it automatically, whenever you insert the dimensions, you don't have to put these trailing zeros. You just put the 4 and enter, and it'll automatically add those zeros, however many significant figures that you've selected, and we'll talk about that later. So here we have a circle with a diameter of 4. If I wanted to make this an equivalent size, so I know that the diameter extends to both sides of my circle. The radius, on the other hand, is only half. And so if I want my radius to kind of match, so if I drug this over this circle and I wanted them to match each other, I'm going to go ahead and double click on my radius. Now my radius is only going to be half of the length of here. So if I know that this distance here is 4, what would half of that distance be? So if I took 4 and divided it by 2, I would get 2. Okay, so what that says is, by definition, and I'll show you that these two are indeed the same size. So if I overlap them, notice how they are equal. So by definition, the radius is half of the diameter. And it's really important to know that so that you can dimension properly. Okay, so now that we've discussed a very fundamental relationship between radius and diameter, we're going to do a simple project that involves both of them. I'm going to create just a really simple pin holder. So I have a Bic pin here, for example. So in order to create a pin holder, the first thing you want to do is measure the diameter, roughly the diameter of the pin. And so I'm just going to measure, I have a soft tape measure here, and I'm going to measure in inches because I am working in inches in Fusion. So if I look at it and I measure it, it's a little less than 3/8 of an inch. So you always want some leeway in your if you're going to put a pin in, right, you don't want the pin to perfectly fit in your holder. You want a little bit of tolerance on each side of it. And so I'm going to make my pinholes 1/2 inch. And then I'm also going to make some arcs on either side of the pin. So in this lesson, I'm just going to use my circle and arc commands, and then I'm going to make a 3-dimensional object from that. So very, very basic shapes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the outer shell of this pin holder. So I'm going to start with my circle command. I'm going to go to the top left here. I'm going to left click on my circle command. Again, notice my cursor has that circle icon next to it, indicating that the circle command has been selected. I'm going to go ahead and start at my origin. I love starting at the origin. It gives it a really nice kind of baseline. So I'm going to left click at my origin. I'm going to go ahead and left click outwards. And then I'm going to press escape to get out of that. The first thing I want to do is I want to dimension this overall piece of my pin holder. So I'm going to go ahead and then press the D key on my keyboard, and that activates this dimensions icon that is right beside my cursor. I'm going to go ahead and left click on the outer portion of my circle, physically drag my mouse a little bit upwards, and then I'm going to left click again. I don't want this pin holder to be huge. I want just a small pin holder. So I'm going to make the entire diameter of this about 4 inches. So I'm just going to press 4 and press enter, and it automatically knows. It's always handy to have a tape measure next to you if you are not familiar with units. And so if I'm thinking about this in terms of something real life, my pin holder is approximately going to be about this wide. This is going to be the diameter, so you have to think about this kind of going across the circle like I showed before. So it's not going to be a very big pin holder. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a few spaces inside this pin holder to hold my pens. And I measured my pen, and I found out that I wanted to only have each of the holes is going to be a 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to start randomly drawing holes here. I'm going to left click here. I think I could probably fit in probably 4 going down each. So to draw a circle, again, I left click, and then I physically drag my mouse outwards, left click again. So again, I'm going to left click, and that is my center. I'm going to left click again, left click, left click. So I'm sorry, I missed a step. Left click, drag my mouse, left click, drag my mouse, left click. Okay, next I'm going to dimension each one of my circles. So I'm going to get into my dimension command, and I'm just going to left click on the outside ring of each circle, physically drag my mouse upwards, left click again. It gives me the option to edit, and I'm just going to say type in 0.5 and press enter. And I'm going to do these for all the circles. So again, left click, physically drag my mouse up, left click, 0.5, enter. Left click, physically drag my mouse up, left click, 0.5, enter. I'm going to say that one more time. Left click on the outside of my circle, physically drag my mouse up, left click, 0.5, and then I'm going to press enter. And then I'm just going to do the same for all these other ones here. If you're struggling to dimension, again, I can't stress enough that this stuff is very difficult to learn in the beginning. It's really hard to kind of get synchronized with Fusion. And so if you're struggling to put the dimensions on, understand that that is normal and that it's okay. And you will get through this, and don't quit, because if you choose to quit, you'll never learn the program. So I'm going to go ahead and press the escape key to get out of that function. Notice how there's nothing next to my cursor. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to dimension this from the origin. So I don't know where each hole is at. In order to, if you notice, we were working with a flat piece. If we were drawing this on a piece of paper, we are only working in 2 dimensions. So there are only 2 dimensions here. We're not currently working in 3 dimensions. And so what I'm trying to say is, when I dimension each object, I have to have 2 associated dimensions with every object. And I'm going to demonstrate that. So I'm going to go ahead and get my dimension command. So I press the D key on my keyboard. I'm going to left click at the origin and let go of my my mouse. Whenever I say let go, I mean left click and let go, meaning I release that mouse button. And then I'm going to left click on my first circle here. I'm going to go in between here, left click, and I want this approximately, say 0.5 inches away. And then, so I dimensioned it this way, and now I need to dimension it this way. So I'm going to left click again, go to that center, and then I want this to be about, I'm going to probably make it 1.5 inches up. That looks about right. So if you want to make your dimensions a little bit different, you can. And then I'm going to do the same. So I'm going to left click, let go of my button, left click the center here. Again, this is going to be 0.5. This one, I think I want to do half. Actually, I'm going to do, let's see, I think 0.5 would look pretty nice here. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat these steps on the right here. Left click on my origin, let go, left click on the center of this one, and then I'm going to left click 0.5, and then my height also needs to be 0.5 here. Notice I'm going to start talking about fully defining things. So notice how after I've dimensioned my objects, they turn black. So the blue ones, I'm just going to demonstrate this, and we'll talk about defining objects. So in order for your pieces or your sketches to not be deformed or accidentally stretched in any way, you have to do what's called fully defining them. I won't get too far into it, but I'll just kind of give a brief description of what that is. So if I left click and hold my mouse, I cannot physically drag this circle anywhere. But notice what happens if I try to drag this blue one over here on the upper right hand corner. If I left click, I can physically drag this wherever I want. And so we don't want that to happen. We always want to define our object because we can accidentally go in and deform our part after we work so hard on it. So as you sketch, it's always a really good habit to fully define all your entire sketch. And so again, I'm going to left click on my origin, left click at the center of the circle, left click here, 0.5. Again, that height, I want it to be the same. So I'm going to have that height be 1.5. So all of these are black up here. I'm going to do the same with the bottom here. So I'm just going to go through and add all of these. Again, if you are struggling through this, know that that is normal. I think the biggest thing that I do for my students is just try to normalize frustration because as you're learning a new program, these things are frustrating. It's not easy. Whenever I started learning as a student, it was extremely frustrating to me. I didn't quit though, and I just continued to kind of suffer through it until it just became second nature. So I would encourage you to do the same. If you need to take a break, I often give my students breaks because it does get frustrating and sometimes you need it. So don't ever feel bad for just kind of stepping back and just taking a break. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to create arcs here. I'm going to try to clean up this area a little bit. So I'm just going to drag in this dimension because I just want this area to be fully visible so that you can see what I'm doing. So this time I'm going to do an arc and I want to create a 3-point arc. So the 3-point arc does the two ends of my arc. So I'm going to go to the top here somewhere, left click, let go, and then I'm going to go down a little ways, left click and let go. And then I'm going to drag my part up a little bit, and then I'm going to press the escape key and get out of that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get into my line command. It's this top kind of looks like a candy cane. I didn't say that before. Left click on my line command. Notice my line command icon is next to my cursor. I'm going to start at this top end of this arc, and I'm going to left click, let go, and then left click, let go. Okay. Notice how I have if I hover over here, it turns blue. This indicates that this is a fully enclosed part, meaning there's no open areas. So I don't have any gaps or anything. And that's important if we're going to go to the last step and make this a three-dimensional object. And it won't become a nice object if you don't have it fully enclosed. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is draw the other side. So again, I'm going to go to create, left click on create, left click on arc, left click on my 3-point arc. Again, I'm going to left click, starting at the top, go to the bottom, left click, and then I'm going to drag outwards. At this point, I don't care what size this is. Press my escape key to get out of that arc command. I left click on line command, and then again, left click, let go, left click, let go, and it forms my circle. So now I'm going to define the radius of my arc. Remember, it's not going to be in diameter. Only full circles are defined automatically in diameter. My radius, on the other hand, is going to be, my arc, on the other hand, is going to be defined by the radius. I'm going to left click, I'm going to press my D key to get into my dimensions command. I'm going to left click on the arc. I'm going to drag a little outwards and left click. I'm not sure how big I want to make this. I think maybe 1.5. That's a pretty good dimension there. And I'm going to press escape to get out of that and to drag it over, kind of look at it a little bit. Yeah, that looks okay. I also need to define the length of my line. So I'm going to left click, get back in dimension, left click on my line, somehow selected another part, So I'm going to left click on this top and left click on this bottom piece. Okay, and so it's going to let me tell it how long I want it to be. I'm going to left click here, and I want this distance of this line to be, let's see if we can fit 2.75. I'm going to press escape. I'm going to go ahead and drag it here just for a minute. I'm going to go ahead, that looks pretty good. I'm going to left click on this other arc and let go, left click, and again, I want the radius to be 1.5. And then I'm going to dimension this line to be, again, the 2.75. And I'm going to press enter. I think I have 2 decimal points. There we go. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I want to dimension how far this arc is from the center of the origin. Because right now, again, I can physically drag these pieces around, which I never want. I want all of these sketches to be fully defined, and so they will turn black. So I'm going to get into my dimensions command, and I'm going to dimension from the center of the arc to this line here. I'm going to move my dimension outward so that you can see that. I'm going to go ahead and left click. I'm going to make this probably about 0.8 inches. Let's see, I think I need a little bit more space, so 0.85. I think 0.9 is going to be the best fit. Again, I'm going to left click at the origin, left click on this line here, and again, I'm going to type in 0.9 and enter. The next thing I want to do is I want to dimension, I want this to be halfway up and halfway this way. And so what I'm going to do is I need to take this 2.75 and divide it by 2. So that is, see, it's going to be 1.375. Hope I did my math right in my head. I'm going to left click, and then I'm going to get into my, left click on my origin, left click at this bottom place here, and then this distance here is going to be 1.375. And that is going to center this so it's halfway this way and it's halfway at the bottom, if that makes any sense. I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to left click at my origin, left click at this bottom line again, and again I'm going to left click and edit this to 1.375. Okay. All right, so I'm really happy. Notice how everything is black, indicating that everything is fully defined. The next big step is I'm going to make this a three-dimensional object. So this is always the exciting part for me. The first thing I always like to do is I like to get an isometric view. Isometric tilts our object at very specific angles. And to get into that view, you select this home button. So I'm going to left click on this home. Notice how it turns sideways. And I always like to be in this view before I extrude it so that I can understand how tall it's being extruded. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Finish Sketch. So I'm no longer in my sketch, and notice how my toolbar up here at the top changes, and it gives me the option of extruding. So extruding is our magic button that turns everything into three dimensions. It will only turn a profile into 3 dimensions. And so a profile, again, has to be fully enclosed and it cannot overlap on itself, kind of like a figure 8. So I'm going to left click and let go on extrude. Notice how this box pops up. The first thing we always want to do, notice how this blue box is selected and it says profiles. So it wants us to select the profile. I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to left click on this space. And I have the option of physically dragging this up. So I left click and hold and drag this piece up. And it's always nice to kind of preview this. I think probably around 2 inches looks really nice. And so I could either drag it up to 2, or I can go into this box under distance, press 2, and then just click OK. And we are done. So this gives us a beautiful, nice box. You can look at it using your orbit command. So if you go down here at your view toolbar at the very bottom, this left-hand one, which kind of has like a bunch of like circles going around a plus sign, You can left click and then you physically move your mouse around and it'll allow you to see all of your parts. Notice how our bottom is open, and it's okay for this design. You know, pins don't always have to be completely closed, and pin holders don't always have to be completely enclosed, but it's just a beautiful design. I love how this turned out. I think it turned out pretty good. Um, so with that, we are done with this lesson. So I hope you love learning about radius and diameters as much as I do. I'm kind of a weird nerd and I love all the details involved in design. I love usable design and I love teaching children, especially, how to design. If you're an adult and you just feel completely, what am I trying to say? Completely insulted by the fact that I keep bringing up children, don't worry. I didn't learn Fusion until I was much older, but I teach middle school students this every day. They learn just as fast as college students. I used to teach college in the past, and so I can vouch that the speed is the same. You're able to learn it. You do need to know some minimal mathematics information behind it, just to understand definitions so that you can use them properly in the program. If you're frustrated while you're learning this or frustrated using Fusion, take a break. Know that it's normal. Just keep going. Don't give up. And I hope to see y'all in future videos. Don't forget to subscribe.